Hey guys, welcome back to Mystifying Miracles. I'm Kristen and got another true story for you today. It'll be kind of a quick one, but I think it's a cool one. It's out of the Vietnam era, so listen along and I hope it's a blessing to you guys. A man named John Warton, he had a mission, and it was to fly around the border of southern Vietnam, which also included parts of Cambodia. This was taking place in 1969. He was a mission commander for a Huey Military helicopter. With him, he had 2 pilots and 2 gunners on board, and they were to be looking for soldiers and materials that would be coming in from the north through and into Cambodia. In addition, they also had other air support up there in the air with them, and they also had 2 gunships below them for extra support. And on this night in 1969, they had just stopped, went down to refuel. They had had a 2-hour patrol, so they were just gassing up so that they could go back up for another patrol. Now, John, he had actually qualified for an air medal, and this was due to him having done this particular mission so many times. Over the previous 2 to 3 months prior, he had done several of this same patrol, and he had done it well with relatively no problem. And for this particular tour of his, he didn't have many days left. Technically, he shouldn't have even been on this patrol at night, because you see, the next morning early, he'd be leaving for a week's rest in Bangkok. Now, John was well aware of all the combat going on around him, and of course, unfortunately, men dying and everything. But this particular thing that he did, the patrols, they were relatively safe and he hadn't had any issues. So he thought, no biggie to do this last one, the night before he leaves. Well, on the first patrol, before they went down to refuel, they had been flying and, just looking for about 2 hours, and everything had went fine. Well, it was when they had finished refueling and the helicopter was going back up into the air for the second patrol, when some of the men aboard noticed that something weird had been sat improperly in the cockpit area. And it wasn't there before, so it had been set there improperly when they had gone down to refuel. Well, as the Huey helicopter is in the air, it actually does not have sufficient power to stay in the air. And right at this point, it was nearly about 100 feet off the ground when all of a sudden a loud siren began to blare in the men's headphones. The helicopter itself began to shake and wobble pretty violently. Then, John says, it began to descend out of control. And then it just stops flying altogether. That's when immediately John knew this is a dire situation, because you see, aboard, they were carrying explosives and flares. So they crash, they will surely die on impact. He says he began to hold on to the metal frame of the helicopter, and he says that's when his whole life flashed before his eyes. So many things that he could remember as a child, then as a teenager, going to prom, all these certain events began to flash. And that's when John, he didn't know what else to do. He cried out, "Jesus, save me." And as soon as he said that, John says he saw him. He said Jesus was wearing a white robe and that he was seated as if he was on a tribunal. And it reminded him, this vision he was having, of the Lincoln Monument in D.C. That's kind of what it looked like. He said the vibration of the helicopter stopped, and they began to hover right above the tree line. Many seconds went by of them just hovering, and everybody probably collecting themselves, thinking, whoa, Pilots, he said that night, they felt safe to go back up finally into the air, so they proceed to do so. John says about 15 seconds passed when all of a sudden those sirens began just blaring into the men's headphones again. The helicopter, it shook and it vibrated violently once more. And he said it began to drop again. But this time, John says he was calm. There was no panic. There was no anxiety. He was just calm and collected. And he says that the Huey was able to stabilize above the tree line again. Well, of course, the pilots this time, after that happening twice, they were like, not taking a chance. So they decided to land, which I do not blame them. And a few hours after that, John left for his week's break in Bangkok. He didn't know it at the time, but this would be his last combat mission, and that was due to the reduction in military force put in place by Nixon. John states that the God of the Bible revealed himself to him that day, in those last moments in Vietnam. He says, God, he's very real, and he was accessible at just a heart's cry. All John had to do was cry out to him. He was there. And that was when John says he realized he hadn't survived all these missions that he had been on because he was lucky or because he was intelligent or careful or any of those things. He said he only survived because of God. Once he got home after that last mission, John says he began to pore through the Bible, just reading it. He was hungry for it. He said things began to pop up that he began to confess, such as lust, his sinful pride, things like that. He just confessed them and prayed them about them to God. John says he knew for a fact that Jesus died on the cross and rose 3 days later. And he says that last night in Vietnam, he said Jesus saved him in more ways than one. Later on, John did go on to get married. He went into business and moved to Chicago. He and his wife had 4 children, and he now has 12 grandchildren. So he went on to thrive, and I thought this was a cool story to share with you guys. Let me know your thoughts, what you think, or if you have any input. I thank you guys for watching and just, supporting me by watching. You mean a lot to me, guys, and I mean that, so thank you very much. I will see all of you for the next one.